Chapter 6. Skepticism's Opposite. The great aim of education is not knowledge, but action. Herbert Spencer. My purpose in the previous chapter was to draw your attention to the peculiar and perhaps incomplete view we often have of our own knowledge, and in doing so, to help you properly set your goals and expectations regarding the process of learning truth. Learning is a lifelong journey, a path where the peak of every mountain climbed simply becomes the starting point for a new ascent toward an ever taller summit. However, the problem remains that when it comes to the most profound, significant truths of life, reason and observation alone cannot take us the whole way on this journey of knowledge. An additional something is needed to access those profound branches hidden behind the tree's leaves and fruit. And we've established that skepticism cannot fill this void. In fact, quite the opposite. It can place knowledge in the role of a destination rather than a journey, transforming the acquisition of knowledge into a carrot dangling in front of a donkey, forever out of reach no matter how far he travels. But unlike in that metaphor, this carrot on a stick doesn't motivate progress. It discourages us from trying. What is to be done then? Remember the verse of Scripture we discussed in chapter 4? Seek out of the best books words of wisdom. Seek learning, even by study and also by faith. The missing ingredient, then, seems to be what we might call the opposite of skepticism: faith. In modern usage, the word faith has become somewhat fuzzy and vague. It can be used and interpreted in a variety of ways depending on the context. It might refer to a person's set of religious beliefs, or simply indicate a feeling of trust in a person or thing. Generally, the most basic definition that comes to mind is simply belief. But in reality, faith and belief are not the same thing. My hope is to untangle this term so we can better understand the role faith plays in our journey of truth-seeking. To do so, I wish to highlight two critical elements of faith: justified belief and congruent action. 1. Justified belief. The Book of Mormon prophet Alma stated that faith is not to have a perfect knowledge of things. Therefore, if ye have faith, ye hope for things which are not seen, which are true. That phrase, things which are not seen, which are true, may seem paradoxical. If we do not yet have perfect knowledge, and if these things hoped for are not seen, how can we know they are true? How can we feel confident placing our hope in them? The words of the Apostle Paul can help clarify. He wrote, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." Note that the Greek word hypostasis, translated as substance in the King James Bible, could also be rendered assurance, basis, or foundation. Both Paul's and Alma's definitions suggest that faith must have a basis or foundation. We must have some form of assurance to justify our suspicion or hope that the thing which is not seen is in fact true. In other words, faith is not blind, but is a belief founded upon actual substance, the evidence of things not seen. What does that mean? What evidence can there be of things which our senses cannot detect? I invite you to ponder that question as you listen to the following story recounting the discovery of the element we call oxygen. Oxygen and invisible evidence. Today, it's common knowledge that oxygen exists in Earth's atmosphere and is essential for life. It's also widely known that it plays an important role in combustion, and that it's found in water and other substances. But for most of human history, these facts were unknown. Perhaps the first suspicion of such a substance arose from the experiments of ancient thinkers, who observed that either a mouse or a flame, when sealed within a container, would quickly die. Later, similar tests were conducted using a container placed over water. In these, the water level inside the jar would rise before the mouse died or the candle went out, suggesting that some part of the air was consumed in both respiration and combustion. In 1774, Joseph Priestley conducted an experiment in which he heated some calx of mercury, a red chalky substance now known as mercuric oxide. To his surprise, the calx gradually disappeared, leaving behind a small amount of mercury. Priestley discovered that this process produced a gas, and in a container filled with this gas, a candle burned brighter and a mouse lived longer and became more active. Inspired by Priestley's discovery, French chemist Antoine Lavoisier performed his own experiment. He poured 4 ounces of mercury into a long-necked glass flask called a retort, sealing its mouth inside a bell jar filled with normal air. After heating the mercury, chalky red calx formed on its surface. Lavoisier observed that the mercury and calx together had increased in mass, while the same volume of gas had disappeared from the bell jar. The remaining air, he noted, was no longer fit either for respiration or for combustion. Lavoisier correctly deduced that when mercury is heated, it absorbs the salubrious and respirable part of the air to produce the calx. He then took this calx, placed it in the retort, and reheated it as before. The calx gradually disappeared, a small amount of mercury remained, and the volume of gas inside the bell jar increased. Lavoisier found that a flame burned much more brightly in this gas than in common air. He first called this gas vital air and later renamed it oxygen. It's remarkable that this vital air has been present in the atmosphere, flowing into our lungs and coursing through our blood for as long as humans have existed. And yet for millennia, this colorless, odorless gas went undetected. Through this story, we see that our knowledge of oxygen's existence was made possible by observing physical signs and symptoms that were perceptible to the senses, and then using reason to draw from those observations the conclusion that seemed most logical. In similar fashion, though many truths are not seen and cannot be perceived directly, all truth emits certain signs or physical proofs which can be detected and traced to their source. When you see the leaves, you know with certainty that a branch lies behind them, even if you cannot see it. But let's not overlook another important form of substance of things hoped for present in this story: the word of a credible witness. This assurance from someone who has seen has sparked many a search for personal knowledge. Each person who played a part in the discovery of oxygen relied upon and built upon the work of those who came before. Lavoisier would never have conducted his experiment if he hadn't first heard and to some extent trusted the words of Priestley. And Priestley's discoveries likewise depended upon those who preceded him. And perhaps if you, like myself, have never sealed a mouse within a jar or witnessed the oxidation of mercuric oxide firsthand, you too trust their words without seeing for yourself. Such trust in witnesses is vital for us to survive and function in society. Therefore, 2 forms of evidence of things not seen constitute the basis of our faith. 1. Signs: an object, quality, or event whose presence or occurrence indicates the probable presence or occurrence of something else. Think of paw prints signaling a nearby bear, or a red morning sky signifying an approaching storm. And 2, the words of reliable witnesses, also known as testimony. Remember Alma's response to Korihor: "Thou hast had signs enough. Ye have the testimony of all these thy brethren, and also all the holy prophets. The scriptures are laid before thee, yea, and all things denote there is a God, yea, even the earth, and all things that are upon the face of it, and its motion, and also all the planets which move in their regular form do witness that there is a supreme Creator." Sparked by the testimony of one or more witnesses, or by the signs we encounter ourselves, we may begin to believe, or at least feel a tug in our hearts urging us to believe. But even this justified belief, founded upon actual substance, is not faith unless we add its second essential element. 2. congruent action. Often, belief will naturally inspire a desire to act. If you trust your doctor, you'll likely take the pill he prescribes. If you believe your house is on fire, you don't need additional convincing to raise the alarm and flee to safety. But that isn't always the case. For example, although we're all aware that regular exercise and a balanced diet lead to a healthier, happier life, it's rarely easy to consistently put that knowledge into practice. However, action is always a requirement of faith. James wrote, "Faith without works is dead." This is where faith and mere belief differ. James E. Talmage highlighted this distinction when he wrote that belief is a mental assent to the truth or actuality of something, excluding, however, the moral element of responsibility through such assent, which responsibility is included by faith. Belief is in a sense passive, an agreement or acceptance only. Faith is active and positive, embracing such reliance and confidence as will lead to works. One cannot have faith without belief, yet he may believe and still lack faith. Faith is vivified, vitalized, living belief. Islam similarly defines faith as belief in the heart and expression upon the tongue, and action upon the limbs. Action is the second crucial ingredient. In order to learn by faith, we must combine belief and action, making it a living belief. Jesus' teachings usually included an invitation to act, not only to believe. "Go and do thou likewise," he taught. "My doctrine is not mine, but his that sent me. If any man will do his will, he shall know of the doctrine, whether it be of God or whether I speak of myself." In other words, we can't know if his teachings, or anyone else's, are true simply by hearing and believing. We must begin to do what those teachings instruct us to do. Only then can we discover for ourselves whether the teaching is sound or whether the teacher is merely speaking of himself. By no means is this illogical. A young piano student can only learn the truth of his teacher's instructions on theory, rhythm, and technique by going home and applying them in daily practice. Nor would it be very easy for a man to learn principles of finance while spending frivolously and living beyond his means, or to discover the peace and power of integrity while cheating his colleagues or being unfaithful to his wife. Acting according to our beliefs invites further learning, while failing to do so risks losing the knowledge we've already gained. As Neil L. Anderson said, "Your faith is either growing stronger or becoming weaker. The future of your faith is not by chance, but by choice." Belief alone becomes a dead end on our journey of learning. We must choose to act in line with our beliefs, and doing so will invite further evidence. "Dispute not because ye see not, for ye receive no witness until after the trial of your faith." So we've established that faith necessarily comprises two pivotal ingredients. 1. Justified belief, belief founded upon signs and or witnesses, and 2. Action or behavior that aligns with that belief. This living belief doesn't cancel out the need to depend on reason and observation. On the contrary, faith aids and augments these tools. We use our senses to observe the signs in the world around us, or to hear or read the words of witnesses. And we use our reason to discern the significance of those signs and testimonies, what deeper truths they might reveal, and to determine whether the witnesses are credible. As Dale G. Renlund noted, observation and reason work synergistically with faith. As previously highlighted, when we base our beliefs on the evidences we encounter and allow those beliefs to inspire action, our active, vivified faith invites further evidences to appear. The practice of combining belief and action produces even greater signs and witnesses, in a continual process I like to call the faith cycle. Examples of this cycle of learning by faith appear in both grand and modest ways throughout history and daily life. Think of Christopher Columbus, who discerned signs and witnesses suggesting he could sail west to reach the Indies, despite widespread skepticism. Yet he took a leap of faith, acting on his founded beliefs, and as a result discovered the Americas. Or consider Gandhi, who believed passive resistance was the most powerful weapon against injustice. Having tested it in his personal life, he was convinced of its power and inspired others in South Africa to follow his lead. Their seemingly impossible victory over an oppressive government, achieved without violence, further fueled Gandhi's faith and led to even greater triumphs in India. On a smaller personal scale, think back to when you learned to ride a bicycle. I remember watching my older brother and his friends whirring around on their bikes, a sight which offered encouragement, even a sign, that I too could learn to ride. My parents spoke reassuring words to me, acting as witnesses to a reality not yet realized. But choosing to act on these signs and witnesses didn't enable me to mount a bike and speed off effortlessly. I started with training wheels to help stabilize the bike, and even so, my first attempts were halting. I collected a few scrapes and bruises along the way. Yet my founded belief sustained me, and after several determined hours of practice, I gained confidence. Eventually, my dad declared it was time to remove the training wheels. Once again, I was uncertain about this thing not yet seen, but the prior evidences were still there, along with new ones I'd invited by working to develop my skill. This new leap of faith brought fresh scraped knees and elbows, but my faith propelled me forward until the ability to ride a bike, which before had only been hoped for, became reality. This understanding of faith, not only as a combination of justified belief and congruent action, but as a cycle where evidence, belief, and action motivate and reinforce each other, reveals a third bonus element. 3. An additional element of faith. The bonus element is this: the relationship faith shares with time. The simplest way I can describe it is that, though it can be dramatic to witness moments of great faith, its true power is most accurately understood when observed from a distance over time. The faith cycle isn't a one-and-done event like passing a test or graduating from school. It isn't a shiny trophy you earn and then place on a shelf to collect dust. There's no beginning and no end to the cycle. We are meant to progress through it over and over as a lifelong process. Several terms already introduced hint at this. Allow me to revisit them. Hope. Hope is a word closely associated with faith. Both scriptural definitions I've shared use it. Hope for things which are not seen, which are true, and the substance of things hoped for. Unfortunately, like faith, the word hope has also accumulated conflicting modern meanings. But in the original Greek of the New Testament, the word most often translated as hope is elpis, also rendered as expectation, trust, or confidence. It is derived from the verb elpo, meaning to anticipate. In this sense, hope implies patient expectation, optimistic looking forward, and trust in a future event yet unseen. It's much stronger than the casual cross your fingers sentiment which our modern use of the word suggests, so much so that Paul calls hope an anchor of the soul, both sure and steadfast. Now, a deep dive into the topic of hope could be worthwhile, but for our purposes here, I wish to only emphasize that hope is a time-sensitive virtue, looking forward to its future fulfillment, which at present we see not. It has value only as long as it perseveres and stretches across time. Faith, being closely related to hope, shares this time-sensitive nature. It involves hopeful anticipation of the future, but also entails looking back, remembering evidences from the past. One frustrating aspect of human nature is how quickly conviction can fade when the basis of our faith isn't immediately visible. But faith requires that we prompt ourselves to retain in remembrance the evidence from the past. King Benjamin warned, "If ye do not watch yourselves and continue in the faith of what ye have heard, even unto the end of your lives ye must perish. And now, O man, remember and perish not." Living belief. As mentioned, James E. Talmage called faith living belief to emphasize that it requires action, as in you must live what you believe. But this phrase also implies something else. Living things grow. Growth is a defining characteristic of life. I'm reminded of this fact every spring when the trees by my house become weighed down with new branches, blossoms, and leaves, revealing to me all the new growth that has appeared almost like magic since I trimmed them the year before. Though older than I am, those trees continue to grow. The same is true of faith. Remember Neil L. Anderson's warning that your faith is either growing stronger or becoming weaker. Faith, in order to be classified as living belief, must be growing. And for its growth to continue, it must constantly be nourished. For this reason, it is insufficient to judge the health of your faith based only upon its condition in the present moment. Its trajectory must also be taken into account. In the following chapter, I'll quote from Alma's allegory of the seed, which compares faith to planting a seed in your heart. The value of a seed lies in its potential for growth. If the sower knew his seed would remain forever a seed, never to sprout root or stem, it would lose all worth to him, and he would cast it away. Likewise, a small seedling would inspire no satisfaction if it were to never grow beyond its present size. The gardener who waters his small sprouts in early spring makes perhaps the most compellingly visible example of the exercise of faith. He draws on the past, remembering when his garden was nothing more than barren soil and a handful of tiny seeds. And by observing the trajectory set in motion by his acts of faith thus far, cultivating the soil, planting the seeds, watering them, and making sunlight accessible to them, he is able to look to the future with optimism and anticipation, hope even, to the autumn day when he will harvest the fruit of his faith. Imagine how the hope of this gardener would be crushed if, after weeks of care, the plants in his garden remained the same size. When they first appeared, the gardener was thrilled to see these first signs of life, but such excitement could only linger as the seedlings continued to grow. Similarly, what may have constituted living faith last week may no longer qualify today. The training wheels must come off. If the evidence, belief, and action within your faith cycle haven't grown, your faith may be withering, and if nourishment is not provided soon, it will die. Thus, the faith cycle might be more accurately depicted as an upward spiral. Belief invites action, action invites evidence, evidence strengthens belief, and so on infinitely. Trajectory. Let's clarify one last idea. Earlier, I noted something that might seem like a contradiction. Faith must be founded on evidence, on signs and witnesses. And yet, in chapter 5, I warned against sign-seeking. Jesus said it as plainly as possible, "A wicked and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign." Though at first this may seem inconsistent, make no mistake, there's a subtle yet powerful difference between skepticism and faith when it comes to signs. The difference is this. Faith is an inclination to believe the signs already given, while skepticism is an inclination to disbelieve until one more sign appears. Faith inspires a person to act, trusting that further evidence will follow. The skeptic withholds both action and belief, waiting for proof. Yet, as we've seen, further edification rarely comes to the skeptic. Both faith and skepticism correctly recognize the importance of evidence, but one leads to learning and mighty works, while the other produces doubt and decline. To put it more simply, imagine doubt and belief on opposite ends of a gauge, with doubt at the left extreme and belief at the right extreme. Faith places the needle anywhere to the right of straight up neutral. Even if that needle is angled just the slightest degree into the belief half of the gauge, the faith cycle is activated. And as long as that belief continues to inspire congruent action, the cycle endures, causing our learning and influence to spiral higher and higher. This is why Jesus said, "If ye have faith as a grain of mustard seed, ye shall say unto this mountain, Remove hence to yonder place, and it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible unto you." However, an inclination towards doubt, skepticism, breaks the connection between evidence and belief, halting our faith cycle, stalling our learning, and beginning a downward spiral. Then, the evidence we once trusted begins to look iffy. Our motivation to live by those beliefs fades, and soon we're left with the dead, stagnant remnants of our once thriving faith. A simple example. To conclude this chapter, I'd like to provide one more simple example to illustrate the use of observation and reason in synergy with the faith cycle over time. Imagine you are on the street of a town you've never visited before, trying to find your way to the library without a map or smartphone. You stop a stranger and ask if he knows the way. The stranger tells you that if you continue south for about a half mile, you'll come to an intersection with a gas station. If you then take a right and continue for about a mile, you'll see a fire station on the left. Go another half mile and the library will be on your right, adjacent to a park. Now, as this stranger is giving these directions, you have no way of confirming whether they're accurate. For all you know, they could lead you off a cliff. A skeptic might refuse to take even one step until the stranger provides unmistakable proof that he truly knows the way. On the other hand, blind faith would urge you to immediately start walking, trusting every word. The consequences of doing so might not be too serious, but the fact remains this person is a complete stranger to you. He may be mistaken. There's even a remote chance he's a prankster, or, to take an extremely skeptical view, your arch-enemy in disguise, leading you into a trap. As we've discussed, true faith doesn't call for blind belief, but for belief founded on evidence, signs, and witnesses. In this example, the stranger acts as a witness. He claims to know what you at the moment cannot see. This is where observation and reason must come into play. Is there anything in his appearance or manner that casts doubt on his reliability? Does he have the mustache and sneer of a stereotypical James Bond villain, for instance? Are his directions coherent and logical insofar as you can verify them? For example, if the street you're standing on doesn't actually run north-south as he claimed, that might be a clue he's not particularly gifted with directions. In this hypothetical case, let's say the stranger seems of sound mind and behaves in a friendly, straightforward manner. The street you're on does indeed run north-south, and when you glance in the direction he pointed, you spot a traffic light about a half mile away, suggesting there may be an intersection just as he said. Your observation and reason have now produced evidence sufficient to support belief. You don't yet have knowledge that his directions are correct, but belief combined with action is enough. It would be silly to thank the stranger and then stand in place, satisfied merely to believe, as though tapping your heels 3 times would transport you to your destination. Of course, belief must be brought to life, vivified by acting upon it. So you begin walking south, and as you approach the traffic light, you begin to see clearer signs of an intersection. Cars stopping and passing in 4 directions, and the shape of gas pump islands coming into view. By the time you reach the intersection, you now know what you had earlier only believed. The intersection and gas station are now in plain view, just as the stranger had described. This experience provides a firmer foundation for your faith, encouraging greater confidence in the remaining directions. You turn right at the intersection and continue walking, anticipating the next landmark, a fire station on the left. Before long, signs appear. First, a flagpole, then the unmistakable outline of a red fire truck parked outside. As you pass by, you clearly read the words Fire Department in black letters above the brick building. Once again, acting on belief has led to confirming evidence. By observing these signs and reasoning through their meaning, your belief grows firmer. Now, with conviction, you expect your destination soon. The stranger had said the library would be a half-mile farther on the right side of the street next to a park. But as you walk, the experience is different than before. All you see on the right is a long brick wall with the rooftops of houses beyond. Surely, you think, as I get closer, this wall will give way to the open grass of the park, and I'll see the library. So you keep walking. But soon you begin to feel uneasy. You've definitely covered at least a half mile, yet the brick wall continues unbroken as far as you can see. Were the stranger's directions wrong after all? Should you keep going or find someone else to ask? You turn to search for another passerby, and you see the library. It's across the street, adjacent to a park, exactly as the stranger described. His instructions hadn't been perfectly accurate. He'd mistakenly remembered it on the right when it was actually on the left. Yet, even with imperfect directions, by choosing to believe and act, while continually evaluating new evidence through observation and reason, you reached your destination and gained knowledge bit by bit along the way. Throughout life, the learning process follows similar patterns. Whether you're asking for directions or exploring the deep mysteries of the universe, observation and reason must be paired with living belief in a lifelong process of patiently, persistently spiraling upward through the faith cycle. We don't wait for perfect knowledge before continuing our journey. Instead, we act on the fragments of truth we've uncovered so far with hopeful, anticipatory faith that even more will be found lying in the path ahead. Summary. Since skepticism discourages action and progress, the missing tool to facilitate our journey of learning is faith. Faith has two components. One, justified belief, a belief or even a desire to believe founded upon physical signs or the testimonies of reliable witnesses. And two, congruent action, works consistent with our beliefs, which actively bring our beliefs to life. In the faith cycle, belief and action invite further evidence, which then prompts even greater belief and action. Therefore, for faith to remain living belief, it must be growing and expanding. Questions. What role has faith played in my learning? What evidence, whether physical signs or testimonies of reliable witnesses, have I encountered in my life, and what deeper truths might they be pointing toward? To what extent have my actions, choices, and behaviors aligned with my beliefs? Are there beliefs I claim to hold but am not currently living in harmony with? What is the current trajectory of my faith? Is it growing, stagnant, or in decline?